All right, there we go. Looks like we are live. Okay, looks like we are live. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Doctor. Okay, technical issue. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Alrighty. Very good. Okay. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our live on how to break free from emotional eating. You guys are in for a treat. We have Dr. Aalia here. So, Dr. Aalia, welcome. And can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani, and I am a board certified family physician, obesity medicine physician, and I'm also a NLP coach. So I help people really with a lot of different things, but most recently my practice is focused around helping people to lose weight and helping them to learn and engage in sustainable health practices, kind of like day-to-day lifestyle activities that they can sustainably do so that they can have the best health.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for what you do. So let's dive directly in. What is emotional eating? If you could tell us a little bit about it, what you see in your practice mainly, what are people struggling with when it comes to emotional eating?
For sure. So emotional eating, the way that I describe it, it's when it's a repeated behavior when people tend to reach for food for comfort. And it's when we reach for food for comfort and it's our only coping mechanism to soothe from overwhelming emotions, from stress, sadness, anger, and even in some cases, happiness, when food becomes our sole or main way of coping and soothing these emotions. That is what I refer to as emotional eating.
Interesting. All right. So, what are some of the things people can look out for if that maybe what they're experiencing? What are the signs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so oftentimes, honestly, my patients that struggle with this, they know when they struggle with it. They'll usually mention it as, because when I do an intake for my clients that I work with, I'm asking them what are their struggles, what are their challenges, what are things that are holding them back from achieving the health that they're looking for. And oftentimes they'll bring it up themselves that they tend to emotionally eat, that they will stress eat, they will comfort eat, they will overeat. These are all words that kind of lean towards the same underlying issue, which is that they are really addressing food or using food in a way to distract or numb or to soothe, again, from the actual thing that they're struggling with. And so some things that people will notice is that they tend to do it mindlessly. So for example, they are stressed and they'll go and reach for a bag of chips, and before they know it, the bag of chips is gone, or a box of cookies and it's gone. And often when I ask further questions, they recognize that behavior was triggered by some kind of overwhelming emotion, whether it's stress, sadness, anger, loneliness. There's usually an emotion that kind of led to that behavior.
Got it. Yeah. And, as a society, I think we have nobody has taught us how to regulate our emotions, watch our emotions, and even like watch our thoughts and things and manage them. Right? We're not taught that. But what are some of the things people can start doing to regulate and observe instead of overeating? What do you advise people for some of your patients and clients that may be suffering from?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think, just to speak on what you said, that we innately know how to go from 0 to 100. We know how to get angry, right? We know how to get to that emotional overwhelm. And this is partly part of like kind of our evolution as humans, but also part of how our nervous system works. When we have upregulation, it happens en masse, like altogether. And then that over time, that's become innate. That's become central to like, kind of like a reflex. It's something that's a part of us. We don't have to think about it. But what isn't innate is being able to come back down after we've been upregulated and had our nervous system kind of excited. And so we have a mechanism that our body goes through, neurotransmitters, etc. But that takes time. And often, sometimes we don't even, when we're in the height of the emotion, we don't even want that to happen, right? Like when you're really angry, sometimes you want to stay angry. Like you can't even, someone's like, calm down. You're like, no, I can't. You're just really. And so really what can help us to do that, to be able to kind of go up and then come down and respond appropriately, right? Because there's nothing wrong with getting angry or getting into that emotional state, but it's when we're not able to come down and when we stay in that heightened state that we can experience dysregulation of our nervous system, dysregulation of our behaviors as a result of that. And so some things that I generally will recommend for people to start is to become aware of that. First of all, that's the first thing, because oftentimes that awareness is missing. And so understanding, first of all, if there are some patterns in your life that you are noticing is kind of holding you back, whether it's being in a constant state of anxiety or being in a negative space emotionally or mentally, oftentimes that's related to nervous system regulation. And then realizing and paying attention to how are you spending most of your time? Are you spending your time doing a lot of things that kind of put you in that state? So always in a rush, always doing, having a heavy workload, feeling like you have so much to do and not enough time. Those are some signs that maybe there are some things in the way that you've built your lifestyle that's contributing to that. Next step, I would say, is where can you give yourself the space to practice the opposite, to practice being in that rest and digest, right? So if we think about our nervous system being in the sympathetic, parasympathetic, those are the two systems that we generally talk about when we talk about nervous system regulation. If we're to describe what I just did about kind of being always up here as a sympathetic, how do we get into that rest and digest, that parasympathetic more? So just like with everything, it takes practice and it takes time to build that muscle. But by really carving out time for yourself, whether it's journaling or exercising or talking to a loved one or going for a walk, whatever it is, finding time that brings you back down, that gets you more in touch with your body, that's what I would recommend for people as a good place to start in terms of kind of helping you to balance.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. It all starts with awareness. And when you are super excited in the sympathetic, like you said, you don't have access to your prefrontal cortex, the thinking mind, and you could be driven by emotions. Your emotional brain is driving. And so you don't want that. Take a deep breath. Sometimes would that help? To kind of get into parasympathetic, or maybe walk away, or
Yeah, all of those things, actually. No, that's a great point. So what happens is when we're in that state, it's very hard, as you said, to rationalize. We're not in our rational mind. And so what can be really powerful is instead of trying to rationalize things, just kind of making yourself feel safe in your body. And so ways that you can do that in the moment exactly is through breath work. So taking those deep breaths can be really powerful in terms of kind of getting your body, bringing your body first back down, and then your mind will follow. And so that can be one way that you do that. Sitting down if you're standing, for example, walking away, taking a moment to yourself to do whatever you need to kind of, again, to bring things back down for yourself.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Maybe we'll talk about breath work later. I know you are an expert on those. But how can one differentiate from hunger eating versus emotional eating?
Great question. And so oftentimes hunger is really a physiological, primarily physiological in nature. So we're going to feel maybe an emptiness in your stomach, a little bit of growling. You may feel a little bit low in energy. And those all can be signs that you are truly hungry. There is actually also something called a hunger scale. If you are somebody who has lost, and this can happen, lost that feeling of knowing when you're hungry and when you're full, practicing using a hunger fullness scale can be helpful in introducing that mindfulness back into your world, into understanding and paying attention to your body's cues for when you're truly hungry, when you're truly full. And as opposed to, and usually this hunger comes on gradually, as opposed to emotional eating, where it's often very sudden, very intense. It's often a craving and a hunger for a specific thing or specific kind of food. So usually foods that are high in sugar, fat, or salt. And those are the foods that are generally what somebody who is leaning towards emotional eating versus true hunger is reaching for. And so those can be some things to help identify the difference to start.
Yeah. Okay. So hunger scale would be one, right? How would someone rate their hunger, and what are the ratings look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually pulled it up just in case we went over that. And let me pull it up. I don't know if I can share my screen, but I'll just go through the scale. If I can't, I don't know if, can I share it or no?
I believe so. There's a present button at the bottom. Let's see if that.
Let's see. Share screen, maybe. I hope it won't show all my screen. I've got too many tabs open, but just in case, let me get that ready. And then let's go. Let me give that a try.
Yeah. And
are you able to see this?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. I wasn't sure if it works. Yay.
Yay, we learned something new. Okay, great. So this is a workbook that's part of a course that I have actually on emotional eating. And what I share here is understanding this hunger fullness scale as a way to be more mindful about how you approach food. And so you can see if we start up here at one, we have painfully hungry, dizzy, nauseated, and feeling physically ill. And then we gradually work our way down to where you're feeling full. So, and sometimes on the opposite side of that extreme, we have feeling painfully full, and that's at 10. So when we are determining hunger, when is a good time to eat would be somewhere around 3, 4, where you're hungry, ready to eat, your stomach is slightly empty, you're feeling, your stomach feels a little bit empty, but there's not a lot of urgency. Or here in between where there is some urgency. We definitely don't want to wait till we're extremely ravenous and we're having these we're feeling anxious to eat, because at this point, this is where people, and oftentimes I notice this with some clients, is that they'll skip meals throughout the day, either intentionally or unintentionally, and come home to, wanting to binge eat or eat a large amount of food because they've waited too, kind of quote unquote, too late to eat. So a good sweet spot is between 3 and 4, and getting used to kind of knowing where that is very much individual from person to person.
That makes sense. We, especially as professionals, we are, guilty of maybe not eating when we should, right? Because of work, or we are busy and maybe binge eat later, right?
Yes, exactly.
Which I think emotional eating, binge eating has been, I think, one of the reasons that could be contributing to the obesity pandemic we are seeing, and so I think being mindful of this and getting it under control would be one of the things you could do, among many other in your path to freedom, from emotional eating and things, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. I agree. I believe that oftentimes people, because at the end of the day, there's many, of course, obesity and overweight is very complex and multifactorial. However, what's important to understand is it's the day-to-day things that you're doing that really can contribute or sabotage your efforts. And so we know that consistency is what breeds results. And so if we're consistently engaging in behaviors such as overeating or emotionally eating, the big picture or the sum of that will be that you're going to be indulging more often. And so we know that at the heart of a lot of weight loss efforts is calories in, right? And so if we're having excess calories because of these mindless habits, mindless eating, overeating, then we're going to have the result of excess weight or obesity. And so absolutely agree with you that it's these behaviors that also contribute to our weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And sometimes, the hunger cues and the hunger scale, for some of us, we may not be really connected with or in touch with our sensation, right? What would you suggest to someone who says, sometimes, I don't know, if what I'm feeling, does that make sense? What is the first stage to start noticing and connecting and knowing your hunger cues and things, being mindful? What would be some of the steps?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's multiple factors that can affect it because it's kind of nuanced. Overall, for some people, I guess we'll do kind of general big picture. One would be really paying attention to your emotional balance, your nervous system regulation. Because as I said, as we talked about, when you are in this parasympathetic, so you're in that constant anxiety, fight or flight, it's difficult to pay attention to those cues because, as you said, your prefrontal your decision making goes out the window. So being able to have a more balance in terms of where you are from your nervous system regulation, being more calm, being able to have more rest, that's going to help a lot. And so addressing that. The other thing is sleep, making sure you get enough sleep. So we know that when we don't get enough sleep, that also contributes to our dysregulation of our nervous system. We know that it leads to imbalances in our hormones. Our hunger hormone goes up. And so we tend to feel more hungry when we don't get enough sleep, among many, many things that we lose out on when we don't get enough sleep. So making sure you're getting enough rest. I generally counsel between 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night to help with that. The other thing is really paying attention to the kinds of meals that you're eating as well in order to be able to feel that feeling of hunger, of fullness, excuse me. Oftentimes especially women, we tend to know we're like magnets for carbs and we are really good at finding the carbs, but we're not really great at finding the protein and finding the fiber. And so making sure that you have a balanced plate, that you are hitting all of your food groups, you're getting enough protein, fiber through fruits and vegetables, and carbs are fine. Carbs are not the enemy, but they're not, they shouldn't be the mainstay of your plate by any means. You want to have majority of vegetables. You want to have a quarter carbs and a quarter protein. When we're eating more balanced like this, we are going to be feeding our body what it needs. So we're going to be able to be in tune more with what's going on in our body. And then we're less likely to reach for food when we're not hungry because we're satiated, we're feeling in a good place. And then the last thing I'll say about this is in some people, there can be a hormonal aspect to this. And this is where medications for weight loss really come into play to help you to regain that feeling of fullness for people who may have gone too long without experiencing it or understand how to experience that.
That makes sense. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. We may do another session about the weight loss medications and things.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, talk about them. But what are healthier ways of coping with stress instead of turning to food? You may have mentioned some of the things, but to just summarize it and generalize it for our audience.
Perfect. And so again, this is going to be a little bit nuanced for people in terms of how to cope with stress. But if you have that foundation I mentioned earlier of making sure that you're resting well, that you're engaging in behaviors that help you to feel, to get your nervous system more regulated, that you're eating balanced meals, now it's going to be more specific to each person as far as what gets them in this better, not to say better mood, but what moves them out of that stressful capacity. And so oftentimes with my patients who emotionally eat because of stress, really stress is more of a feeling and there's an underlying emotion. So whether that underlying emotion is anger or resentment, for example, let's say at work, they're given so much work to do and they have such a heavy workload balance. Maybe the true underlying emotion is resentment. Maybe they resent that they have to do so much work. Maybe there's sadness that they cannot get support. There's usually a true underlying emotion that's the root of that stress. Mm-hmm. And so if you can really become, again, awareness, first become aware of what that is, and then mm-hmm. think about ways in which in other capacities, other areas of your life, you deal with that. So if you are feeling that resentment or anger, what are some ways to get you out of that? So maybe it's, again, spending time with a loved one. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's moving your body. So finding what those things are for you specifically and engaging in that regularly. To that mm-hmm. capacity, I will also add that physical activity and breath work, which we'll talk about separately, but physical activity can be really, really beneficial. There's a lot of scientific evidence to show that really being physical, moving your body in any way that you enjoy can be so helpful in helping to overcome these negative emotions and even depression, anxiety. And so it doesn't have to look like a full-on workout. It can literally be like a dance party, 5-minute dance party in the bathroom, just shaking it off and moving your body can be really helpful as well.
Right. Yeah, for sure. The culture we live in, it's always go, 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 right? We are busy. Our kids are busy. They have so much high demands at school too. There's always running. And so balancing that out for us and for our kids too, right? I agree. Exercise is a great way of relieving stress. Stress is something that we cannot avoid, right? It's going to be there with all the demands that are there, but taking that time for you and making sure your kids also have that time to go out and exercise, whether it's weekly, mm-hmm. once a week, twice a week or so, making it structured, scheduled, because we are habitual creatures, right? If we make it a habit, it will become automatic. We can only manage stress, not necessarily eliminate it. As long as we live in this world, there's going to be some stress, from the demands we may have, but managing that, right? Very good. Exactly. Excellent. Good. Are there specific foods to avoid if I am prone to emotional eating? Is some of the things, some of my teenagers that I see in the office ask me about. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There isn't any particular food that are bad foods, so to speak. However, it's important to understand that certain foods do, whether you struggle with emotional eating or not, they have a certain pull to them. They're going to have this addictive quality to them. They're going to feed your cravings. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's the foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt. And we know that on a physiological level, that these foods release dopamine in our system, this neurotransmitter that makes us feel good in the moment. We know that this feel-good sensation is short-lived, right? But it's that feeling that keeps us coming back for more. And so in general, I do recommend staying away from those kinds of foods. So it's the things that you would typically expect are highly processed foods, chips, cookies, packaged foods that are highly processed, to stay away from, and trying to, again, move closer to having more of a balanced diet that I mentioned earlier, balanced plate, balanced meal, and looking for healthier alternatives such as fruits, nuts, yogurt, things like that, and making them easily accessible. As you said, we're habitual creatures, but also if we make something easy for us by making it visible and accessible, we're going to tend to reach for those things first.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Excellent. All right. And why do I crave sugary food sometimes? After a long day at school or work, why would I do that?
For the same reason that I just mentioned. Those foods, they give you that feeling of like just feeling good. And so oftentimes there's a pull for you to come back to those foods for that reason. And so oftentimes that craving may stem from either potentially not nourishing your body properly, so not giving your food that balanced diet, those balanced meals that it needs in order to feel full, to feel satisfied and nutritionally fueled. So that can be a part of it, is looking into how you're eating throughout the day, but also what is that emotion, or what is that void that you're trying to fill with that craving. So oftentimes when you feel that way at the end of a day, it's again related to stress. A lot of the times you're just stressed after a long day, or you're overly tired. And so there's actually that, again, emotion, or that state that you're trying to overcome with food, rather than truly what your body needs, which may be rest, which may be processing, through either journaling or physical activity. It may actually even be physical activity. Your body just needs to move. So having a list of things and alternatives that you can do at the end of the day, after you've made sure, of course, that you have given your body, the food that it needs, addressing some of these other things can help you.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Excellent. That's a good point. Because the American diet is, full of sugar and salt.
Super
and
processed. Exactly.
Super processed, right? Yeah. And so for some of, the families that may be listening today and that say, okay, but I don't have time to cook or to prepare healthy foods. I have to just get whatever is available, whatever is easy. What would you say?
Yeah, I hear you. This is a very common complaint, a common issue for so many households. There's so many things that I could say to that. I'll start with the first thing, which is that understand that, yes, this is something that's going to be, just like you said, stress can be a part of our life that we accept, and we learn to manage it, understanding that eating healthy needs to be a part of your life. It is the foundation for so much improvement in your lifestyle if you really understand the importance of it. And we know that when we understand the importance of something, we prioritize it. So understanding first that and making it a priority is what I would say to start with there. Secondly, once you understand that priority, it's really easy to make healthful foods that take little time. And some of it can be through meal prepping. So taking some time on weekends, maybe to chop vegetables or cook vegetables or whatever it is and have them ready. And then throw meals together by, maybe you boil some brown rice for the week, you cook a batch of chicken, or you freeze a batch of chicken that's seasoned, you chop some vegetables. And then during the week, you're just bringing things out of the freezer and throwing it in the crock pot or the air fryer. Get creative. Once you really understand that this is the mission, we get so creative in terms of figuring out how to make it work. So I would say first understand that the importance, that you're in control, and then the rest will come easily.
That's a good point. Very good. Thank you. And someone says that I think I am using food as a reward. What would you say to that person? And why would that be? And what can they do?
Great. So we often talk about emotional eating in terms of negative emotions, such as I mentioned earlier, sadness, anger, etc. However, there is where it can be used as a reward system too. Now, again, the experience of eating can be very emotional, and this is normal. There's nothing wrong with that. It is when reaching for food to cope with these emotions as our primary source of coping, that's the issue. So if food is your main way to reward yourself, while in and of itself it's not bad or unhealthy, it can lead to unhealthy behaviors, and it can lead to an unhealthy relationship with food. And so that's where I would advise caution. And so I would definitely recommend that you look for other things to add into your rotation for your reward system, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's a mini shopping spree or a massage or, whatever it is, but having other things into your rotation for your reward system would be a great idea.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, emotional regulation is a big thing. I think learning that is going to be huge. Right. I think, unfortunately, we're not taught, but coaches like Dr. Aalia and myself will help you, manage this emotions and regulate them so that you are not addicted to things, whether it's food, even shopping, right? You may switch from food to shopping, but you will hurt your wallet too.
Yes,
Right?
yes. That's why I said it's good to have a rotation of things, so not coping on any one particular thing.
Right? Yeah. Right. Just find healthier ways of things, right? Balancing, like you said, maybe spending time with family, maybe make planning it, right? Putting it on the calendar, and rewarding yourself with rest, napping, like give your body
Exactly. A bubble bath even. Exactly.
something healthier, something productive, something that's not destructive, right? Good.
Exactly.
Very good. So for anybody listening, Dr. Ali is going to demonstrate breath work at the end. So please be sure to watch that. It's going to be super helpful to get you out of that sympathetic response. And so that's going to be a big treat, right? But what other question that usually comes up is that, why do I binge eat? Some of the patients I see say, I do see I binge eat, but I don't know why. What would you say that? How can they figure it out? Have you experienced that too in your practice?
Yeah, with binge eating can be a little bit tricky in the sense that we sometimes socially say binging or binge eating when we really just mean, oh, we ate a whole bag of chips or a box of cookies. However, binge eating in and of itself, from a medical perspective, is a medical diagnosis. So we do have binge eating disorder, which is one of the ways of disordered eating. And so I want to definitely preface by saying that if you suspect you might have an eating disorder, such as binge eating disorder, to talk to your healthcare provider to get support for next steps. And so some of the hallmarks of that is if you eat a large amount of food in a short amount of time, if you're hiding this behavior from other people, maybe you're eating in private and you're doing this, engaging in this behavior, and you're eating to the point where you're feeling very uncomfortable, uncomfortably full to the point of nausea sometimes even. So those are some things to pay attention to. If this is something you're experiencing, again, make sure you bring this up with your healthcare provider and let them know, because this is something that often requires intensive therapy as well as medication to treat in some cases. Now, that aside, if you do struggle with just binging, like as I just said, what we talk about socially, just kind of eating more than you expect to eat in a sitting, then what I would say as far as things that you can pay attention to or things that can help you to avoid that, things that we talked about earlier, again, so making sure that you're resting, you're sleeping enough so that your hormones are more regulated, making sure that you are eating more balanced plates and more balanced meals so that, again, you're feeding your body what it needs. And then really paying attention to eating mindfully. So this can be really helpful with anyone who tends to feel a little bit of loss of control. And again, with the binge eating disorder specifically, that is a big feature of it, is that they feel like they can't physically stop themselves. Like once they start, they just keep going. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you and I may experience that to a degree where it's like, oh, this tastes so good. We can physically stop, but we're just like, oh, but this tastes so good. And we just want to keep going. So that's a little bit different from that disorder I talked about. And so practicing mindfulness can be really helpful in that respect, where instead of eating mindlessly while you're watching TV or working, taking time out, and you don't have to do this all the time, but if you struggle with this, really, again, taking maybe a couple of weeks to be mindful about it so that you can practice this mindfulness, and then it becomes easier to regulate in other settings. But taking time to sit kind of on your own and pay attention to the textures of the food, what you're eating, how it's making you feel, how you feel when you're full, all of those things can really start to improve your relationship with food and your body.
That's a good point. So you brought up a good point. So I think this person specifically who asked me didn't have a binge eating disorder, but just binging sometimes. The yummier stuff, good stuff.
Yes.
Oh, this is so good, and eat some, more. What would you say to that? And what can they do? If it's something they like and it is good.
Yeah. So again, what I said is still holds. I would say oftentimes we feel like when we have a craving, we should absolutely avoid the thing. Really, the craving only grows. So if you've determined, the first step is, again, awareness. If you've determined and so, get into the habit of making a point to stop and say to yourself, am I really hungry, or am I just doing this because I just want something sweet right now? So first thing is understanding what's happening. And so even if you say, yeah, I'm not hungry, but I just want a bite of this cookie, that's fine. But again, you're breaking that automatic connection. So you're forming a new pathway now where it's not automatic for you to just reach for that cookie. You're taking a pause, and then now you're making an intentional step to still have, if you still choose to have that cookie, then absolutely enjoy it, and then have that. The second step that I would say is that if you do decide you are going to now say, okay, I'm going to indulge, think about some ways, and this may be not in the moment, but ahead of time, where, for example, maybe you pre-package the cookies into single serving bags so that you physically have a representation of what one serving size is. Because the other issue that I face, or a lot of my patients face, is that they don't read the back of the container. And so they think, well, if I'm buying a box of cookies, a serving must be a box. And so, when you flip it over and you see that maybe half a cookie is a serving, and that half a cookie is 100 calories. And so if you're eating the box, so paying attention to those things ahead of time, so that when you're in the moment and it's hard to make proper decisions, you've already, your past self prepared you for your future self, and okay, 3 cookies is 1 serving. I'm going to have 3 cookies. I'm good. Okay.
Good point. And just savor that, right? Like you said, be mindful when you eat that and enjoy it, so that it lasts. and if you really like it, you can have it next time or next meal.
Next meal. Yeah, exactly. When I'm working with patients who are trying to lose weight, I just have them, again, being mindful and just asking, is this going to help or hurt my eating plan, right? And so if they realize, actually, if I have 1 cookie, it's going to be fine, that they've already kind of planned it into their day, then that they can go ahead and have it.
Very good. Excellent. Do you see sleep deprivation and overeating in your practice? If so, why do some of us overeat? We have spoken about it some, but what do you do specifically? And some people may sleep, but the quality of sleep may not be good. And how would they tell if
I think the connection is cut a little bit. Okay, there you go. Okay.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. I heard you say, how can they tell if, I guess maybe you were trying to say if their sleep quality is good or not, maybe something to that effect.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Very good. So that's a great question.
I was saying, like, sometimes they may sleep, but the quality may not be as good. They think they've gotten like 7 hours of sleep, but it may not have been a good quality. Does that make sense? And so yes. How do they tell if that could be contributing, if they're getting good sleep, not going to the sleep side, but
yes, that's a great question. And so when I talk about the 7 to 9 hours of sleep, it's good quality sleep, as you said. And so oftentimes people will know because they'll wake up and they'll feel exhausted. They will have slept the night, but they feel like they didn't rest at all. They're very easily just overwhelmed throughout their day. They wake up tired. They are frequently sleepy throughout their day. And so those can all be signs of that poor quality sleep. There are many, 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 many things that can affect this. And so I'll name maybe some of the more common things that I see in my practice. And so the first most common one is sleep apnea. So having sleep apnea, which is a condition where your breathing is affected as you sleep due to collapsed airways, etc. And so oftentimes my patients, again, who have overweight and obesity, that is a very common complication of obesity is sleep apnea. And so that's first thing we assess for. So some signs of that, if they're snoring or somebody tells them you snore a lot, or again, if they're super tired as soon as they wake up, that's again, something to bring up with your doctor or healthcare provider to get assessment for that. The other thing, as far as like things that can affect your ability to sleep restfully, are your caffeine intake, and particularly caffeine intake later in the day. So I usually tell people to try to avoid caffeine past 3 with a hard stop at 5, depending on what time you're going to sleep, because even if you are able to sleep, it will affect your quality of sleep. We know the same is true of alcohol. So again, paying attention to that. Now, as far as how it affects your eating and emotional eating, I think I touched on this earlier in terms of your hormonal profile. So it's going to affect and increase your hunger hormones. So you're going to notice that days that you get less sleep, and I've noticed this personally, I'm definitely much more hungry, more snackish throughout the day versus the days that I am sleeping well throughout the night. I hope I touched on everything. I'm trying to remember. There are multiple parts of that question.
Okay. No, you did. Yeah. That's a good point. Just paying attention to it and stuff, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I think we are towards the end of our live today. So tell us about breathworks, what they are, what would you recommend, and if you are up to share maybe 1 or 2 that are easier to practice.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that it may be really difficult to get into in this live, mainly because it's very person specific. And the practice definitely takes a little bit longer than probably what we have time to. There's like it would be a whole workshop just to do breath work. And what it is, specifically, what I mean when I say this is specifically understanding the way. Let me take a step back. Remember at the beginning of our call, we said that sometimes we lose our rational minds and we cannot think our way into being calm. So instead of going from top down, we have to go from bottom up, meaning we have to feel safe in our body. We have to bring our body into a state of calm. And then that sends signals up to our brain to get our brains to calm and for that nervous system regulation to happen. And so breath work is such a beautiful way, through deep breathing is such a beautiful way to get into that state of calm and then having our minds to follow in that way. Now, I hope that was clear.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's why there's always this push towards meditation and deep breathing, etc. The easy, quick, and dirty that I will recommend for most people to kind of get into if they're interested in doing more breath work is to engage in this breathing where, number 1, you're engaging your belly. So making sure you're breathing down in your belly versus up in your chest. Oftentimes, and I used to do this for, and I didn't realize until I started doing more work that I was taking breaths up here in my chest and not in my belly. And most of us are doing that. So an easy way to do that is to put on, spend some time, put a hand on your chest, put a hand on your belly. And as you take that deep breath, what's moving? Is it your stomach or is it your chest? And if it's your chest, then that's a hint that you're taking breaths in your chest. And those breaths are always going to be more shallow and they're not going to get you that full impact, that full breath that you really need. So really trying to move your stomach and move, take a look down, and I'm doing it now as we're talking, and see your stomach move up and down.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'll do it together. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, let's do it.
Demonstrate it for us.
Yeah, let's do it. Exactly. And so as you take that deep breath, again, it's really feeling your stomach expand, because it's through pulling those muscles that you're really opening your chest wide enough to let all that good air in. And when you breathe out, same thing. You want to see your stomach push in and push all that air out. Perfect. And then the other thing I tell my patients, it's really nice if you want to really get into it, is to close your eyes. When we close our eyes or lower our gaze, we can really tune into our body and kind of get in tune with what's happening in our body and feel any issues or resistance or emotions that we might be going through. The second step now, or third step, is to, as you're taking these breaths, is to try to prolong your exhale. So try to make your exhale longer than your inhale. So if you're taking a breath through your nose, in, out through your mouth, and you want to have your exhale be as long as possible. And see, just by doing that, even just those few breaths that I've had now, I feel my body just starting to come down. Yeah. And then the last thing, there's so many more things I can build on it, but I think that's a good starting place for anyone, is to really start to learn how to breathe properly, really try to get into that longer exhale. And for an added bonus, when you take that inhale through your nose, try to take an extra sip. We call that a physiologic sigh. So it sounds like this. And I'm recovering from a cold, so you might have heard it sounded like sniffing, but it's taking that extra at the top. And studies have shown that this way of breathing can really get you very quickly into a relaxed mood. And really set a timer for 2 minutes, 1 minute, whatever you have time for. This will really immediately get you into that parasympathetic, that rest and digest, that regulation that we talked about, where you're going to be better to, in a place to do better work, make better decisions. It's just the best place to be to kind of do your best work.
Oh, this is great. I myself feel so relaxed in my body.
Good.
I think most of the time we are in our head, and we're not, school didn't teach us this type of breathing, like
exactly.
you did, right? It would be nice if all of us have these tools, right? We would, our world would be a better place.
I agree.
Most of the time we are in our head, in our mind, and we are sort of disconnected from our body. And just this exercise we did, I felt my body more than before.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that.
I'm
so great.
Sure our audience have experienced that too. So this is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? Tell us.
Oh, yes, I would love to share. So I have my website just popped up. So my website is albidayawellness.com. That's the name of my practice. I'm on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and my website, of course. And so feel free to reach out to me on any of those platforms. I do offer free consultations for anyone who's looking for that weight management and weight loss, or even just mindset counseling, and mindset coaching rather. And then that emotional eating course that I mentioned to you. And I would love to share a code, if I may, like a discount code to your audience. So if you go to my website and you are interested in the emotional eating course, which is a 4-week course, and you use that code HEAL10, so HEAL 10, number 10, you can get 10% off. This is for the first 10 people that sign up for that. They'll get 10% off of the course, which they have a lifetime access to. I highly recommend it. Goes through some of the things we talked about today and even more detail to help you individually understand what are your triggers for emotional eating, how to overcome them, and tools that you can use to, in the future for dealing with that.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Thank you so much, Aalia. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
I should say Dr. Al-Barwani, but I'm a first person.
You're fine. Yeah, I know. Amongst doctors, we're always on first name. You're good.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You should come again, hopefully soon. Right?
I would love to. Thank you so much.